Hello, everyone, again. This is Dmitry Sirota, SVP responsible for strategy in the Security CSU. And I'm here to talk to you about mobile security. All of us experience mobility in our everyday lives. We all have smartphones these days. None of us have feature phones anymore. And we all run into challenges around losing the device. And for our enterprises, the ones that need to provide us apps to make us productive in the workforce, and also for the enterprises that need to provide apps to consumers, there's this constant concern around how do you deal with security in a mobility context. It's a lot more complicated than it was in the web world. And so we're going to examine a little bit about what that actually means. One of the things that we're finding in the enterprise today as CA technologies is that there are two big drivers for the enterprise. There's the requirement to be able to support consumers. So apps that you send out to your customers, whether you're an Allstate or somebody of that sort. And then, of course, there's your employees that are coming in with BYOD, their unlocked phones, and you as an organization still want to be able to manage who gets access to what under what terms. What that has meant is that traditional security models for mobility, things like mobile device management, I'll just create a little acronym here, MDM, as some of you may be familiar with, are kind of reaching their limits in the sense that if I lose a device, or if I don't necessarily want to be able to delegate to the enterprise the ability to wipe my entire device. So enterprises are focusing on this concept of app security. So how do you address just the app and leave the device in the hands of the employee or in the consumer without compromising that? So within CA technologies, there's a realization that there is no one kind of app that you're facing from a consumer standpoint or from an employee standpoint. There's apps, as an example, that are HTML5 based apps. So these are apps that look and feel a lot like web apps, except, of course, they're self-contained on your device. Now, many of you are familiar with apps that are built in native iOS or Android. And these apps actually don't use web technology to access back-end data and resources. They use APIs, something that I'm very familiar with, having been a co-founder of Layer 7 Technologies, a recent CA company. And then, of course, for a lot of enterprises, they now have to also enable their employees to be able to deal with things like Salesforce and Workday and other third-party external apps. And even though they want to be able to deal with these, they still want to be able to empower the employees to have them on their phones and use them. But they still want to be able to layer on single sign-on policies and other types of data security policies. So given the fact that there's a diversity of kinds of apps that enterprises need to deal with for both their consumers and employees, the challenge becomes, how do you deal with security? Security that doesn't happen necessarily on the device, so where traditional MDM vendors play, but happens at the app level, where newer and emerging class of security technologies play, typically characterized as mobile app management, so MAM for short. So some of the challenges and some of the things that you'll want to be able to look at as an enterprise. How does access and federation change? And certainly in the context of mobility here, you see that you're dealing with cloud apps, you're dealing with APIs for native mobile apps. So again, access and federation need to be considered, and in particular how you tie in with your existing investment around directory, identity, single sign-on. Secondly, obviously, is from a personal context, is this whole arena of API security and API management. So all of these apps that reside on these smart tablets, these smartphones, need to be able to go out and call data that resides in the data center. And as a consequence, there needs to be a mechanism for managing how those apps gain access to those back-end resources, whether it's an SAP relational database from Oracle, a SharePoint from Microsoft, or anything else that wants to be shared out to the app. And so again, there's this need to be able to secure that back-end and deal with some of the related problems of enabling the developers to securely gain access to the back-end. And then lastly, particularly in these situations where you're dealing with commercial off-the-shelf or COTS-based products from Salesforce and Workday, how do you layer on security after the fact? So how do you as an organization create these security policies that could then be wrapped around your apps and then distributed through an enterprise store or some other similar mechanism? So again, what you see here are three of the critical challenges relevant to app security in a mobile context. So you're dealing with access and federation, You're dealing with the problem of back-end security through your API. And then you're dealing with wrapping and technologies like that to be able to support these commercial off-the-shelf apps. So the good news for you is that CA Technologies has a portfolio that is able to address all three of these elements. So from the SiteMinder suite, you have a capability to address web, single sign-on, web access, web federation, and then through integration with the Layer 7 acquisition, be able to extend that out to mobility and to cloud and things of that sort. Secondly, obviously from an API security standpoint, the Layer 7 portfolio that is now part of CA also has dedicated, purpose-built API gateways and API security technology specifically designed to secure and manage back-end access for mobility. And so again, it is able to address some of these challenges around how do you gain access to that SAP system, how do you gain access to that Oracle relational database? And then how do you enable the developers to build apps that, again, could take advantage of that API security? And then lastly is this new capability specifically geared towards enabling organizations that want to be able to layer on MAM and layer on security onto an app, whether they built it or not. So that, again, products like Salesforce and Workday and similar enterprise tools can be secured after the fact and can be managed part of the process. And the good news, of course, is there's a suite of other capabilities available from CA Security, including strong authentication and other elements that can be, again, layered into this to provide greater and more enhanced security around one-time tokens, things like geolocation-based access control, and so forth. So, in wrap-up, I think what's important to kind of highlight is that obviously mobile is becoming an everyday part of our lives. It's becoming a greater part of the enterprise focus. Traditional mobile security technologies like mobile device management, which focus directly on being able to secure the device almost like an asset, like what you would get on a PC, are becoming less and less relevant. There's a necessity to be able to secure the app itself. And from that, there's these requirements to be able to support the app, whether it's native, whether it's commercial off the shelf, whether it's built by the organization. And so again, you find this requirement to be able to address access and single sign-on, back-end API security, and then after the fact app wrapping to be able to support the whole range of app security. And CA Technologies has those products. I encourage you to visit ca.com, the security section, and you'll be able to find more information on both the Layer 7 technology as well as the broader SiteMinder portfolio. Thank you very much.